Before I begin, I'd like to state that I've never particularly liked Liliana. In fact, I'm not kidding when I tell that before watching today's program, I went back to reread her designated chapter in the novel and fell asleep 3 or 4 times. I barely finished it seconds before the show aired in Japan, and I like it so much that when the subtitled version was released, I watched it live again. Despite not being a huge fan of the singer, today's show left me feeling down, and I'd want to discuss that in this video. The episode featured primarily a flashback to Liliana's life and the conflict between Sirius and Priscilla. And honestly, I believe both versions told the same tale, just in different ways. The anime version depicts a girl chasing her dream of being a famous singer while determined not to give up on her road, until she has a catharsis that teaches her that life is not as simple as she imagined. This realization of reality inspires her to use her ability for the first time, resulting in a successful performance and eventually becoming the well-known singer she is in Priscilla. Meanwhile, the written version tells the same story, but with a bit more detail about how each stage unfolds. For example, while Liliana's parents seem like good parents in the anime, they come across as somewhat harsh in the novel. However, they act this way because they are aware that their daughter is serious about becoming a singer. So, on purpose, they try to discourage her and be severe with her, thereby strengthening their daughter's determination to attain her objective. Even after Liliana departed, they tracked her down for 3 days and nights in order to bring her home. But they didn't chase her because they wanted to. They did it so she wouldn't think about going home if her singing career failed. Liliana is grateful to them for this, since she knows that if she had a place to return to in the event of failure, she would have given up at some point during her voyage and returned home resigned. However, because her parents worked so hard to prevent her from having any last nice memories, she did not consider making that option after those experiences. It is also not specified in the anime, but Liliana left home at the age of 13, and she has been in Priscilla for slightly less than a year. Similarly, the scenario in which she reunites with her parents occurred when she was 17 years old. To be honest, I can't decide whether I preferred the animated or literary versions because, and I know you'll laugh, the only difference between the two is that Liliana wears a shopping bag on her head in the anime. I believe that having her put the bag on her head in the anime was a risky move that only worked in this version. That is because Liliana's relationship with her parents in this adaptation is not as strong due to the elements that were left out. So, Liliana conducted this act in the same way that the anime version of her character does. However, Liliana from the novel chose to stroll down the street with her parents without the bag on her head. That's because she has a more profound and meaningful bond than her animated counterpart. She is alleged to have walked through the same passage without looking at them while crying. It is unclear whether her parents recognized her, but they most certainly did. And they didn't say anything because, well, they presumably thought their daughter was still working toward her dream. I assume they saw her because if Liliana could recognize her newborn smaller sister, why couldn't her parents? The story goes this a step further by having Liliana think in a self-centered way, stating that her younger sister will most likely be in trouble if she becomes renowned, and their parents begin comparing her to her. I understand that this way of thinking might seem selfish or arrogant, but I believe there's a difference between having a bit of pride and embodying a truly negative trait. For example, a little greed can be fine if it pushes you to work hard for a better quality of life. This kind of minor greed can be a positive motivator. However, this fool is the perfect example of excessive and harmful avarice. Do you see the difference? That is why I say that although Liliana was self-centered in this scene with her thought about her younger sibling, it is really not a big deal because she does not say it with bad intentions. Liliana's determination is another aspect of the narrative that is examined in greater depth. Even though I mentioned it briefly in the preceding point, it is worth emphasizing here to go into greater detail about her trip. The novel describes how Liliana nearly perished in the first few days of pursuing her ambition, but she was saved by a group of merchants, with whom she ended up traveling for a year while working as a singer and maid in her spare time. She eventually parted ways with them because the group disbanded and everyone went their own way. This reminded her of why she was traveling alone in the first place. She did not enjoy dealing with large crowds and preferred a quiet schedule. We are also reported that at the age of 14, she received her first marriage proposal, which she turned down. After that, it is unclear how long she traveled, but it is known that it lasted for several years. Throughout that time, she continued to strive and seek sponsorship from prominent persons, but nothing worked out for her. Things got so bad that she had to spend nights sleeping in a wild animal's burrow. This also drove her to spend some time looking for hidden treasures, possibly in order to survive. Despite this, she experienced adversity and scarcity. She had an insight one day while on the edge of death after eating grass to fill her stomach. Liliana realized that all of the protagonists in the stories she sang about were not her friends, as she had previously believed. That was because, at the end of the day, they were just figures from another era whom she had never met. She also understood that these personalities had never faced the difficulties she was going through because she only knew the positive aspects of their life. She felt guilty to admit that she knew little about the people she admired. As a result, she couldn't help but feel like a failed opportunist who exploited historical personalities for financial gain. The saddest thing is that this insight was not followed with a lesson. Rather, it was a realization of how empty her existence was. And that night, in sorrow and sadness, she fell asleep. The next day, she awoke, walked to the lake, and then performed, just like in the anime. The most interesting portion of the novel, however, is her comments on her performance, in which she states that, while she is not friends with the fantastic individuals of the past, she would like to be friends with the amazing people of today. To be honest, I enjoyed this final sequence not just because, according to the canon, Liliana has already achieved her aim of becoming friends with the heroes of this era, but also because the plaza where she is singing was the first time she was able to sing in tune with her divine protection. Remember that she possesses a divine protection called telepathy, which allows her to converse with those around her. However, perfecting this talent allows the individual to synchronize with the sentiments and emotions of others, but only if they are truly peaceful and at peace with themselves. So, what happened the night before? She accepted that her life was not what she had expected, and when she walks to the lake, she claims that for the first time, she can hear the noises of the grass blowing in the wind, the murmur of the stream, and the singing of insects and birds. Personally, I view this entire sequence of calm as the anime's way of implying that Liliana embraced herself and unintentionally used her ability for the first time. As a result, she was able to provide an outstanding performance in the plaza. To be honest, I thought it was a fantastic occasion to emphasize that this was her first time using her power. That's because, at the end of this flashback, Liliana sings in front of one of her most challenging audiences, Sirius's victims. Which gets me to the following section of the video. I believe Liliana's deed is the final essential part of this episode. To be honest, the anime omitted much of Liliana's past in order to adapt a big amount of this scenario, though they were unable to do so. You see, during Liliana's singing in the plaza, she notices that her voice isn't reaching everyone in the crowd. It wasn't an issue of singing louder, but of something different, which she couldn't adjust for at the time. This section is amusing because it describes a feeling identical to what she experienced when she began her journey. But on this occasion, she begins to recall a specific aspect of her life. You know, despite Liliana's peculiarity, she has had love offers, but she has always declined them since she suspected that those people were approaching her for motives other than a real desire for music. However, she did finally meet Kiritaka. Kiritaka fell in love with her due of her beauty, not her voice. Yes, he later discovered she was a singer, and while he admired her voice, he always felt that he wanted Liliana to be his. But her voice should never be monopolized under any circumstances. That is why he chose to encourage her, and he was the first to start referring to her as a diva and treating her as such. This reminded Liliana of all the times he had supported her, and without her realizing it, the impact of her voice spread to other corners of the plaza. The wording makes it obvious that Liliana's voice's greater reach is due to her divine protection scaling up, which allows her to rule the entire plaza. Furthermore, the anime adds a nice touch and underlines the power gain by showing Kiritaka cheering Liliana on. However, they went a little crazy with the power-up, allowing the singer to continue singing and playing despite being assaulted by Sirius. Whether you believe it or not, this has an explanation, which I shall discuss later. When she falls and is unable to continue, she reflects on her thoughts one last time. She believes she is about to die and regrets not having written a song significant enough to be remembered in history. But she says she is pleased and content if her final performance becomes a topic of talk in any family. But suddenly, Kiritaka arrives and rescues her. While a few of their conversations are removed, the most crucial aspect remains. She reveals that she is glad to be Kiritaka's diva. But let's get to the part about Sirius and Priscilla. To be honest, I didn't think this portion was executed really well. While the fight sequences in the middle and at the end of the episode were enjoyable, the opening sequence felt a little underwhelming to me. Fortunately, this uninteresting scene only lasted a few seconds. I believe there is a significant difference between drawing out a negative scenario for too long and displaying it for only a little moment. Regarding the struggle in general, I'm amazed that the author intervened to provide another indication concerning the mystery of Iris and the King of Thorns. In truth, Sirius originally responded differently in the novel, but the author specifically requested that she do so here. I assume he's already building the framework for the 5th season adaptation, because as I have stated, Iris's subplot will be explored much later. Even though some of their language during the fight was removed, I believe the most significant aspect remained: how the Sun Princess's jewels absorbed the damage rather than her. Also, I believe some anime fans were surprised when Priscilla revealed she had 8 spouses. However, it is vital to note that their weddings were mostly political in nature, rather than romantic. But the most interesting aspect of these two, in my opinion, is when they begin disputing about what love means to each of them. This scene exposes more about the princess' views and shows that, while not being an ordinary lady, she has a respectable moral compass. This could help people realize that Priscilla isn't the haughty and hateful person that the general public perceives her to be. There is also considerable debate about the kiss scene and the moment when Liliana appears unharmed after being hit. I'll explain this in the comments, as it contains spoilers for a potential 5th season of Re:Zero. Finally, I believe Priscilla's sword glow will mostly go unnoticed, since she hints that she's unable to do certain things due to the sun's light being obstructed. I mention this in case anyone is wondering why she didn't follow Sirius into the water. However, this is also a spoiler, so I'll post it in the comments if you're interested in reading it. But that's it for today. I know there's a post-credit scene with Subaru and Regulus, but I don't feel like talking about them right now, mostly because nothing very relevant was revealed, and I'd rather talk about Liliana and Prisca. So tell me, what did you think of this episode?